Welcome to the Badger247 show. I'm Matt Perkins, joined by Badger247 writers John McNamara, Nick Osen. It is great to see you guys again. We have got so much going on. It is peak official visit season. We're going to recap what happened last weekend. We're going to go into what's going on this weekend, maybe talk a couple 2027s, and as always, take your questions from the best Badger message boards around these days. That is at Badger247.com. Great to see both you guys. Nick, I know you've been very busy these days. You had a great appearance on the Cover 3 pod the other day.
Marco, I really appreciate that. It's a cool opportunity where we can kind of get into the team realm a little bit, in addition to a lot of the recruiting that we focus on. I've loved this show that you guys have kindly brought over. And like you said, we got a lot to talk about.
Absolutely, John. Absolutely. Well, let's get right into it from this past weekend. Like we talked about in last week's show, a lot of key visitors coming in for the Badgers last weekend, especially in the defensive backfield. If you've been listening for a while, you know I care about corners and offensive linemen. Those are my two big positions that I really care about on a football team. And they had a couple big ones coming in this weekend. I mean, John, like we talked about last week, we talked about these guys kind of just being defensive backs, especially when you look at like a Chase Geeter. So let's start with Geeter, actually. How do things stand with him after this official? And do you think that, Wisconsin could be a contender for his commitment?
Yeah, I think so. You read, Nick had a story on him, Evan had a story on him. So all the coverage is there, Badger 24/7. I like Geeter largely because of that versatility. And we've talked about him with, we talked about versatility with a couple prospects, couple official visitors over the last couple shows. And, he's a guy I think they're going to bring in as a potential safety, but he could play nickel, he could play corner if you needed him to, and I think that was kind of highlighted in the story that Evan did on him. It seems like Wisconsin's quickly rising up that board for him. A guy that obviously they've kept tabs on, but things have really kind of heated up in the last couple of weeks here or so. So I certainly do think that Wisconsin can be a contender there. I think he's headed to Michigan this weekend, so that one is certainly one to kind of keep an eye on. I think he flipped Penn State for Michigan. So if Wisconsin can cross that hurdle, I think they're certainly in the mix, but a lot will depend on what happens, when he gets on to Michigan's campus, because obviously they've been recruiting at a pretty high clip right now. Just took a big Wisconsin target, McHale Blades. So, the Michigans, the Notre Dames of the world have kind of been a thorn in Wisconsin's side for these official visitors.
Nick, how are you feeling about him in both in Jamyan Theodore, who also came up from Tennessee, potential defensive backfield player? I think I see him as a proper corner, not necessarily a safety, whereas Geeter, I could see him playing in a couple different spots. Let's talk about Theodore, though, a guy I've been really high on for a while. What have you heard from him, Nick, in the wake of his visit?
Yeah, Perko, just real briefly on Geeter, I agree with a lot of what John said. I feel like Penn State, I think, kind of cooled a little bit from my understanding, but Michigan's interest is kind of increased. So I feel like, it'll probably come down to those two. Duke is kind of swimming in there as well, a little bit closer to home too. But I like what Wisconsin did. And for Theodore, Perko, we got to speak with him as well. That's one of those players that I feel like Wisconsin crushed it. Like, I think it checks off all his boxes, relationships, academics, NFL development in those positions. But that's just a recruitment where there's some legitimate competition, as I know John and I have talked about. I spoke with him a little bit, kind of at length for this interview. Tennessee, the in-state school over there, as you know, is in there, kind of in the mix. Now, he's not necessarily from Tennessee originally, actually a standout recruit from Canada. So we'll see how tough those ties are. He does really like Louisville, and he's actually currently at Ole Miss. The only one that would shock me is Kentucky. I personally have Wisconsin top 2 right now, but we will see kind of how these visits shake up for him.
Yeah, John. I think that, as I've talked about before, defensive back is a really key position in this recruiting class. But I think the guy that a lot of people think might be the most likely to commit of the guys who came this past weekend is Arizona offensive lineman Jalayne Miller, John. And he's someone who is rising up boards very fast across the country just because of that athletic profile he has.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big surprise, I think, when he committed to Stanford. I was texting with Nick and Payne, a couple of guys, and I got a chance to speak with him. I said, I think Wisconsin feels pretty good here. I feel pretty good about where Wisconsin stands. Checked in with some people, and I think Wisconsin felt pretty good about that one. When I posted that story, I said, academics are going to play a really key role here. And look, Wisconsin can offer some of the best academics in the country, but Stanford might just be, a tick above that. And I think I don't want to say largely because of the academics, but that played a big role in his decision. And I will say, look, I was feeling good about Wisconsin there. I came out with the story of, ranking the most and least likely to commit. And I think Miller was in my third slot there. So I was proven to be wrong. I've been wrong before, and I'll be wrong again. But Nick can maybe speak to this more. But I did think that Wisconsin felt really good there. Not just the vibe that I got from him, but some people inside the program. So maybe a little bit of surprise there as a guy I had pegged to be that third lineman for Wisconsin in this cycle.
Yeah, John, just to add to what you said, so it felt like, I think going in, we felt like maybe he's the guy that we felt best about being a Badger, maybe in that group. And so there was that confidence there. We both talked to him. I think we both felt like pretty good, but there was never kind of that this kid's a lock. There's a reason we didn't make like crystal balls and things like that. So I think that was good on our part. And it was just weird messaging going in because I had heard from a colleague in our network that he thought, okay, it's Wisconsin and Auburn battling. And then I'd mentioned on Saturday, as I was talking to kind of a national guy in our network, I think the academics at Stanford are going to have them top two with Wisconsin. I do think, not that there's, a medal for these things, but I do think Wisconsin was the second school. It feels like if Stanford, wasn't pushing as much or just obviously wasn't who they are academically, which is not just one of the best football schools with academics, but like one of the best in the country in total. I think he's a Badger, and it sounds like he bonded really well with the guys over the weekend too. I've checked in with Maddox Cochran, who's committed, just talking with him too. So yeah, a little bit of a surprise. And I think now, you and I and Payne and Evan and the team will maybe do some interesting work with like looking ahead for the class, because it'll be intriguing to see, who they get. Still in the mix for Kamari Blair, but some Gamecocks buzz coming out of last weekend with him. So that's where it gets a little interesting.
Yeah, John, with that, I mean, where could Wisconsin turn then for that key third offensive lineman in this class if Blair ends up at either South Carolina or Tennessee, who I also imagine is going to be making a big push for him?
Yeah, when these type of things come up over the years, I always kind of look at, where are they at in-state wise? I think that might be always a place you could turn to. And, there's been a handful of in-state kids that have already committed. Sam Simpson's headed to Indiana. Indiana locked up another kid, that Keaton Moreau, I think, from Green Bay. Tucker Thiemann, kid that Florida offer, I think Ole Miss offered him as well, commits to North Dakota State. Maybe that's someone that you take a second look at. I know that fans are kind of getting a little antsy, a little anxious, but really, you have this entire summer now. You have into the fall, and really, I think they do want to take that third lineman in this class, but it's not a. I don't want to call it a luxury, but it's not a huge position of need. You took 5 in the last 2 cycles. Obviously, Derek Jensen has moved on, but it's not a huge position of need like I would say running back is or receiver is. And it's not to, making excuses or saying, Wisconsin never needed a third. That's their preference to add a third in this class. But I think that's a position now that goes into the summer, potentially gets into the fall where they, kind of look at that board again, see where they're at with some guys that they've had some tabs on. I don't think the sky is falling there, but it's going to be a position now, I think, where Wisconsin's going to reevaluate where they are, see what guys are still uncommitted or see guys that they want to potentially flip and, potentially seeing some of those guys come up for game day visits because, Blair is still out there, like Nick said, but I don't see that one happening. So maybe this is a position that drags out into the fall and got to take a little bit longer look at that board and reevaluate some things now.
Yeah, you mentioned running back as a position of need. Last week, Nick pretty much broke the news a couple hours before we recorded that Amari Latimer was back on campus again. It looks all signs are pointing in the right direction right now. I think Nick looks like he's going to commit sometime later this month or announce his decision. What was the feedback that you have heard after his latest visit to campus on, who we've all called the number one prospect on their board right now?
Yeah, Pergo, I appreciate it. I think we can all, agree. He keeps things a little bit closer to the vest in terms of his process. But, what you said with some of the dates and how things are trending, I think really well. I think that obviously I had checked in with some people, as John says, and, bonding super well, as always, with the guys here. Obviously, his brother's here, incredible staff connections. I believe Evan did a story with somebody in his family, so, like, he might take another, visit or 2 a little bit closer to home, maybe, like, that was kinda mentioned, but I did officially put in a crystal ball, and I'm pretty conservative with those, so, I felt pretty good for about 4 months. I continue to feel that way, Perko, and, I think it's just about letting that process play out right now.
Yeah, John, I mean, is there anyone else who the Badgers would rather have in this class at this point than him?
I don't think so. I wrote that he's been their top running back target for a while now. He might very well be their top overall target in the 26 class with as much as, they've invested into him and, obviously that running back position, how important it is in this cycle. So, like I said, or like maybe Nick said, or like maybe everyone said, just kind of maybe let the process play out. We'll see here. Anything can happen in recruiting, right? Like he could pop up on a campus this weekend. Evan's story indicated that, yeah, maybe Georgia Tech gets him on campus this weekend, but that's when I still feel pretty confident about. You got to just watch what they're doing, right? I mean, you get up there for the OV, come back the following weekend. And this kid's from Georgia, right? So that's not a trip up from Illinois or some Iowa or Minnesota. I mean that's a significant trip with investing a lot of time into that. I think Wisconsin's got a lot of things working to its advantage right now, and I think by the end of the month there's most likely some good news there for Wisconsin fans. But we will have to see. That is not a done deal. I don't want to say it is. I want to indicate that it is. I just think that the way it's trending, Wisconsin likely comes out on top.
Well, let's move forward to next weekend, or this coming weekend, I should say. Sticking with a couple prospects from Georgia, you've got a couple teammates from Marietta, in Jowell Combay and Tony Forney coming up. A couple, potential defensive backs, but also just kind of general athletes. I could see maybe one of these guys even ending up in the slot as well, depending on how numbers work out. Nick, let's talk about these two guys. I'm a little bit higher personally on Combay than I am on Forney, but I think they're both excellent players. So let's start with Combay. He's got a little bigger frame than his teammate in Forney, but I think that he's someone that that Jack Cooper really has been pushing for later here in this recruiting process.
Yeah, Perko, he's done a nice job. Coach Cooper has with these guys, and really a lot of safeties. Like that's a position that I think they're just on the cusp, of a couple guys and potentially some good news. But with Combe, like you said, good frame, good ball skills, huge offer list. Like truly, both he and Forney have really impressive offer list. I would say Combe probably a higher ceiling, definitely more of that, natural safety fit. It's interesting. We had reported it as a group in the preview and things, and then I think just Tuesday he officially kind of put out a top 5, and it's Wisconsin and a bunch of SEC schools. So I think this is very clear that if he wants the shot at playing with his friend and teammate Tony or playing in the Big Ten, like there's one spot. If he's kind of sticking with playing closer to home, playing in the SEC, it's going to be tough. I don't see them as a lock package deal by any means, but I kind of wrote in the preview we put out today that this is just a chance to turn the tides and kind of remember what Madison is about, what he saw about 2 months ago in April, and see what they can make happen, Perko.
Yeah, John, and with his teammate Forney, who is a little bit smaller, but someone who is a pretty versatile piece and a pretty versatile athlete. There, I think that were they to come in as a package deal, that would be a huge coup for this staff and add to a defensive backfield class that, like I have said many times, is thin at the moment.
Yeah, package deals often talked about. rarely followed through with. It's always a fun idea, right? I mean, you're recruiting two teammates. Wisconsin's a unique opportunity for them. I don't want to say that there's no chance that they both come there, right? I mean, that's certainly possible. And Nick kind of laid out that, hey, if you want to get out of SEC country and play in the Big Ten, it's likely going to be at Wisconsin. But like I said, doing this a long time, people talk about package deals. It's a fun thing to talk about for fans. It doesn't always happen, right? I mean, and especially this day and age where everyone's situation is very unique for a number of different reasons. But those two obviously I think complement each other extremely well. Not to bring up the versatility again, but that's something that when I talked with Forney after his visit right after that spring showcase, I believe, Jack Cooper, he likes me because I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. So they think that he can do a number of things in that defensive backfield. Combay is, to me, a true safety, probably one of the top safety prospects in the country. So you stick him back there and you feel pretty good about him. So again, they complement each other well. There's that relationship. They're very close, right? And they've certainly talked about playing together, but we'll have to see how that plays out. Huge opportunity for Wisconsin this weekend to get those guys back on campus. Jack Cooper's done a very nice job there. Safety is an important position. They haven't had anyone commit there at that projected safety spot. So big opportunity for Wisconsin and the Badgers coaching staff this weekend.
Let's head southeast from Marietta, Georgia to a number one spring break destination, or one of the top spring break destinations in Destin, Florida, where everyone from my neck of the woods goes down for spring break every single year, down on 3OA. Zion Legree, former Ole Miss commit, has reopened his recruiting, is coming up to campus, listed as an athlete. To me, he probably ends up at receiver on just given the skill set and the build of the roster at the moment. So Nick, I think he's someone that might be considered, kind of a long shot, but I think that the Badgers are closing pretty strong here on him.
Yeah, Perko, I like what you said at the end there because I actually think, and I'm curious to hear John's thoughts, but I think Wisconsin has about as good of a shot as anybody there. Jordan Reed has done a really good job there, as well as really much of the entire staff and recruiting department. Now it's interesting. He just tweeted out this week that he's heading up to Ohio State. I couldn't get a read just based off that if it's like truly an unofficial or if he's just camping to try to get an offer. We'll continue to dig into that with 247. I know Tom Loy reported on it, but I know that he's working to get that offer, and it sounds like they have been showing some interest. So that'd be one to watch. Florida's been flirting a little bit there, Mississippi State, West Virginia in the mix. But to me, we'll see how he likes it. We'll see how the staff obviously likes and gets along with him here because it's a little bit newer relationship there last few months. But Perka, while I'm not at a crystal ball spot, like I wouldn't be shocked at all if he ends up in this class.
I think, John, that the staff, especially you mentioned Coach Reed, would be very happy if they were able to pull those two receivers out of Florida between him and Pettit, who visited a couple weeks ago. That would be a really strong addition for this wide receiver class to go on top of Tayshawn Bardo, who is one of my favorite receiver prospects, period. I think he is someone who's really going to blow up as a senior.
Yeah, I think they want to get to three receivers, and you had Washington up, you had Pettit up. You've given them, the opportunity to make the moves that they want to potentially make. But Legree just seems like a guy. It's like, hey, we're in a nice spot with him. We can't pass this opportunity up. We can't necessarily wait on Washington and Pettit and just kind of keep their fingers crossed. So when you have the opportunity to bring a talent like him up there with that unique skill set, I think you got to capitalize on that, especially where your board's at right now. So I would imagine the staff's going to go roll out the red carpet for him and try to lock him up. He's a bit newer on the radar here, so committed to Ole Miss, no longer committed there. Wisconsin's got that first OV. How long does he want to drag this into? I mean, does he want to kind of reset the entire process of, hey, I'm back on the market. Let's see what's out there. I'm happy to take this into the fall. Does he want to make a quick turnaround? I think all those questions, I think we'll get answers to on Sunday when we're able to kind of reconnect with him. But things are just kind of brand new, from what I can gather. I'm not sure where his head's at, what he wants to do. Could go a number of different ways, right? He could pop this weekend, or he could be like, hey, I want to do this. I want to do my recruitment all over again, and we'll take it through the fall. We'll get up there for some game days. So we'll have to see there. I'm sure the staff has a pretty good idea of where he's sitting at. Hopefully, we'll get that better idea where he's at on Sunday when things wrap up.
The other key guy coming in this weekend, Nick, is the defensive lineman Ben Duncum from, national powerhouse, Westlake, or I want to say, what is it, Westlake in Austin, Texas,
Lake
or
Travis, I think.
Lake Travis.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
I Westlake's in California. What's one of those lakes? One of these days I'll get them all right at some point. Either way, big kid, big frame, 6'5", 265, probably is going to fill out to about 280 or 290, and especially with the loss of Carmelo Reed as he decommitted and flipped, I think that this kid is someone who is super high up on that board. Maybe not the Amari Latimer tier, but I would put him right under there.
Yeah, Perko, I like how, Max says this with guys like has risen up the board. Now, this isn't just like a late OV ad. I had reported basically right when they offered him, we spoke, and he had set up a visit. So he was set to come in the spring, and he just wasn't able to make it up. He had like a scheduling conflict with another sport track. And so now they're getting him up here. I think he's decently high on the board, like you guys said. He spoke with us in the spring. He recently talked with Evan, and he talked with our colleague McLean Baxley over at Oklahoma State. He just took an OB there. And I just get the sense, even if he sees Kentucky, I think he's either kind of looking for that Big Ten or he really liked the feel at Oklahoma State. It looked like they did some things with his family that I think he really liked. So this, to me, similar to Combay, guys, is just what are you looking for? I think he's got a great fit as kind of that, jumbo D-line edge potential in this defense under Mitchell and Whitlow. I think they've both done some work with him. While I'd be a touch surprised just a little bit if he called it on the spot because there's still that Kentucky trip looming, and I get the sense he's very close with his family in terms of a decision. Again, a guy I feel good about with Wisconsin's chances. I think that they've done a really good job even from afar. And hey, I mean, it's a little bit different from Texas, but you come up here, you see Madison, Summer, get the time with the staff and the guys. I'm pretty intrigued there, guys.
Yeah, I mean, I would be too, John.
Yeah, that jumbo edge, however you want to label it, I think it's an interesting pitch to, some of these prospects who are looking at potentially, lining up there. Hey, we could play with your hand on the ground. Hey, you could play standing up. You could do a number of different things. I think, like I said, it's an intriguing pitch for a kid who's coming up there. 6'5", 260. He certainly fits that mold of a Michael Gardner who already got up there, Corey Walker, those ends who play, they're 6'6", 290, 6'6", 300. So, I think he fits that mold well. I kind of wrote when he scheduled that OV, he might be Carmelo Reed insurance, and then here we are. We're still looking for that jumbo edge. So we'll see what Wisconsin can do there. And like Nick said, this isn't just a new kid that they have sparked up interest with. He's been a name that's been up there since the spring. That visit just kind of fell through for a scheduling thing. Now that Wisconsin gets their chance this weekend, another big opportunity for the staff.
And it's not just 2026s who've been in the news, Nick. There have been a couple 2027s making waves as well, especially with Wisconsin's advanced camp that happened this past weekend.
Yeah, so, Perko, I love the tease, man. You're a pro with this. So the staff's going to be busy this weekend, fellas. They've got the OVs, and then there are, I won't say the number, but there's a good amount of 2027 key visitors coming up. We've been all over this at Badger247. Couple names that, I'll kind of tease here. Near 5-star, but a 4-star safety / corner, Tavares Harrington from Illinois. A lot of great players from Illinois. In-state star, top 247. I think he's like top 130, 140 right now. Cole Ryder, O-lineman from Germantown. Obviously, Coop Catalano is here with the Badgers. One more name, we'll maybe say Richie Flanagan from Notre Dame Academy here in the state. So loaded list, guys. We've had all the names up since I think last night. In-depth preview on the way, but really worth checking out. And we got another promo flowing right now too, guys.
If they manage to pull Flanagan with those Notre Dame ties, it would be one of the biggest shocks to me in a long time.
Yeah, I'd agree. Still pretty early for him, but the dad was there, the brother's going there, or is already there. It's kind of the way I think it plays out. But look, we'll see what happens. Very early for him, very early for these 27s, right? So we'll see. But I mean, I would just encourage, people out there, get on the boards. I mean, the content's great, but the message board is the lifeblood, right? And Nick was the first one to start adding some names on there. Evans complimented him. That's the kind of stuff I think fans love to see. I mean, you're always looking ahead. Obviously, you got these OVs, but these 27s are some intriguing names on there. So I highly encourage people to hop on, check out some of the names because recruiting never stops, right? I mean,
It
like
does.
Nick said, this is going to be a wild weekend. So good time to lock in and get on the message boards.
Well, speaking of those boards, we've been asking for your questions here for us to take here on the show, and we got more this week. The first one I'm going to take is actually from Randy Bechtold, who wants to know, can you provide a general strength workout the players do during the summer? Did a little digging, talked to a couple people about this one, and I can tell you for a fact that what this team is trying to do this summer isn't as a lifting group, as a strength and conditioning. They are, everything is about winning the fourth quarter. Everything is about being, you know, a team, not letting each other down, being as physical and nasty as they can be, and making it so teams don't are afraid to tackle them in the fourth quarter, right? Guys don't be surprised when you see a lot of, a little more Jackson Aker than you're expecting to see this fall, because I expect him to be a closing hammer in the fourth quarter. And word out of campus, he's at 22 miles an hour at 235, 240. That's scary. And so I think that what they're trying to do is this is also an extension of Grimes, right? This is an extension of the Grimes philosophy that they are bringing in, and not just have it be system on offense, have it be mindset. And I think that is the biggest thing that they're doing. Not, obviously, yeah, they're going to be lifting heavy, squatting heavy, doing all that kind of stuff. But I think even more about what they are doing with the strength and conditioning program right now is about player mindset, team mindset, being a team, not being selfish, not being lazy, but actually being there as a team. I think, I'll pitch my show with Bernie for a second. Me and Matt Bernstein do a podcast. And one of the things that Bernie noticed, especially as a former team captain, these are the kind of things that stick out to him. Darren Dupree gets tackled. I forget which game it was. I want to say like Indiana last year. His shoulder pad pops out. It's out for 3 downs. No one fixes it. And that's the kind of thing, it's those little details that this team has not had, and that shows that they have not really been a cohesive unit for 2 years. I think that is the biggest thing that they are trying to change with S&C, with their just overall philosophical approach for the 2025 season. But I will extend that out to you, Nick. Do you have any other insights here on what they're trying to do with strength and conditioning here this summer?
Well, Perk, I think that was pretty cool, man. You dropping some scoops with us. That was really for real well said. I would just add, I think, yeah, I was just on a radio, spot earlier today, and I kind of teased it over the weekend, John, on our boards, but basically, I don't think that people kind of fully understand this, reflective of the team as well as recruiting. A lot needed to be kind of fixed, added, switched, turned around when Coach Fickle got here, right? And I think finally, speaking with people in the program, parents of players, recruits, parents of potential recruits, the culture, you're hitting on, Perko, I think is finally where it needed to be. Because I don't think, and this is not a shot at Chris or the previous regime or anything, it is what I've been told, that it wasn't where it was supposed to be in 21, 22, 23, I think, with a lot of changes. And now I think it's getting built back up to a spot that you're comfortable with. Am I picking 12-0 this season? Not necessarily. But I think that as long as recruiting wins come, some of these wins, the culture is in a nice spot. And I think you just spoke to that as well with some of this offseason training.
Absolutely. Honcho, I think, here on the boards is trying to be a co-producer on this show, because I think he sent in about a dozen questions for us. We're not going to get
Honcho's
to all.
awesome. You guys will like him.
So we're not going to get to all of them because we are running short
Yeah.
on time here, but I am going to throw a couple of these at you. John, I will start with you. If we offered scholarships based solely on pancake blocks, how many 5-stars would our offensive line haul in annually? I don't even know how to answer that question, but I just thought it was kind of funny. I think that, if you look at some of the guys that they bring in, it's funny, right? Because you look at a guy like Michael Roski, in this class, right? I think that kid had like 130 pancakes last year because he was playing in a pretty low division of Wisconsin high school football. So I think that, a pancake block might be great, but a pancake is not built the same if you are playing at, I don't know, Lake Travis as you are maybe out where Roski was playing.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going out to watch him play when he was a junior and, kind of in the country, right? It was like Rosendale. So, you pop out of your car, like, you could see him from a mile away, largely because he's 6'8", 300, but, also because the guys, surrounding him weren't that big. But, yeah, I mean, he ranks up there high. And then, like we kinda talked about earlier with, they've taken some really intriguing linemen over the last couple cycles here. And, they maybe haven't hit on all their top guys that they want in 26, but, I think a lot of people are excited to see that next wave of talent, on the offensive line. And Roski's certainly one of them. Hardy Watts, Haywood, obviously he's not gonna play this season, but there's certainly a lot of guys that are intriguing there. So I guess
Davenport, I just
Yeah, Davenport is the other name
right.
I think that'll been,
So
he's been turning a lot of heads.
I don't know how to answer the question exactly, but, I think the future's bright at the position.
Nick, next question. Under the current regime, what high schools with 7-on-7 teams have become the unofficial pipelines for Wisconsin, and why?
Is that for Honcho?
Yeah.
Is that for Honcho? Yeah, that's my guy. He's funny. I wouldn't say, any are quite at that level like a direct pipeline. However, I will say that this staff is doing a really, really nice job in the Indianapolis area, the state of Indiana, and back-to-back classes. They've gotten a couple guys from the same 7-on-7 group, training group. Mills to be made. Shout out my friend Jamil Smith out there, who does a great job training and coaching those guys. So that'd be my pick there.
I'm personally just going to go. What the emphasis I've noticed has been on the Chicagoland area in addition to Indianapolis. I think that they are getting more and more active in Chicagoland than they had been under Christ, under Bielema, and which is, I don't want to say an up and coming region, but I think it is a place that there is developing more and more talent. The place personally I would like to see them go into a little bit more would be St. Louis. I think if you can reestablish some St. Louis connections, if you think about going back like the Kevin Cosgrove era, right? Who want to go back a quarter of a century, but that guy was bringing up some of the top talent from St. Louis every year to Wisconsin. St. Louis produces a ton of great players. Guys from Brandon Williams to Scott Starks and Jamar Fletcher and my boy Warren Herring and guys from classes near and far coming up. I would personally would love to see more inroads being made in St. Louis. So, all right, final question before we get out of here from the, I guess we're going to stick here with one more from Honcho because I think he really wants that co-producer credit here. Last one I want to ask with you guys is, are the unannounced silent commits more of a placeholder to save a spot unless their dream school or high NIL package falls into the lap? And when would Wisconsin move on if they feel like this is the case? John.
I mean, those are kind of ones you want to tiptoe around, right? I think I'm going to totally avoid an answer here, but you kind of always want to respect the kid and his decision, his timeline, everything like that. So I mean, those are. I'm not going to come and say there's X amount of silent commits, and then if they don't hit on X amount of date, then Wisconsin's going to make this move. I guess I would just trust what is being reported on Badger247 and trust the moves that the coaching staff is making, right? So if the coaches are kind of moving out some official visitors at specific positions and they've hosted guys at specific positions, then they might feel good about guys at specific positions. So yeah, I mean I guess that's all I'm willing to kind of dive into. Again, it's like you want to respect these kids, their decisions and their process, because everyone's unique, and you only get to do this once. Unless you decommit, you can do it twice, and then you can do it again in the transfer portal a couple times. So I want to respect their first time.
Luckily for us, we get to do this more than once. We get to do this every single week. We appreciate everyone tuning in here to the Badger247 show. Make sure that you are subscribing to Badger247. Nick, what's the promo code they should be using right now?
Yeah, so actually no code needed for this one, Perko. Just go to the site, hit join, 50% off an annual, which again, I would tell you guys still very affordable if you can. We appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, make sure you are tuning into the show here. Subscribe on the channel. Go to Badger247.com for all the latest news. The just awesome message boards, man. I've been really blown away by the activity on these message boards. You know, as a bit of a transplant over to the 247 community, it's been really cool. So keep up the great work, everyone. Keep sending us questions. John and Nick, keep up the great work. And so we'll be back again next week with more questions, maybe some answers, and a whole lot of stuff to talk about. So until then, we will see you guys over on the website, and thanks for tuning in.